Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that is featured on the channel a couple of times before. This is going to be review number 4 from these guys if I remember correctly, and this is another style that I've not tried from them yet, so curious to see how this one turns out. But I have been impressed with the other beers that I've had from these guys so far, and I think this is a brewery to keep an eye on actually. So for this one then we are going to go to a little place called Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg, Göteborg on the Swedish west coast, and we're going to have a look at another beer from AKiA Brygghus. So this particular beer is called Opaque. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial oat stout. So yeah, I have to say I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. This beer was released as part of the Lokal och Småskaligt assortiment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2021, and yeah, I think it's my first review from these guys in like at least 6 months. I think the last review I did from them would have been back in the summer. But the beers that I've had from this brewery so far have all been from the lighter end of the spectrum. I think it was a rye IPA that we had first, and then we had a New England and a West Coast, if I remember rightly. And next month, actually, in the March order, there will be a black IPA as well as another double IPA. But I'm going to go for the black IPA next month. But yeah, this will be my first foray into dark beers by AKiA Brygghus, so I'm hoping that this one is as good as the light beers that we've had from them before. But yeah, a relatively new brewery, and as I've said, I'm quite impressed with the beers that I've had from them so far, and that was the main reason behind getting a hold of this one. And I do like an oatmeal stout as well, so I was curious to see what an Imperial oat stout is going to be like. So yeah, let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from AKiA Brygghus before, and we will no doubt return to them in the near future. Like I said, there's an interesting beer next month, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about AKiA Brygghus then, on to my brewery notes. So AKiA Brygghus, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg, Göteborg on the Swedish west coast, and the brewery was founded by Christian Figved back in 2016. So he'd worked as a lighting technician in the music industry, and this job had taken him all over the world, and he was actually a sound engineer for the soundtrack of Our Lives, and he also worked with the Wannadies and Tallstrom as well actually. So he had travelled around apparently for 8 years, but then he had children and decided that he wanted to kind of stay put in his work life. So he just, you know, he kind of settled down and got into home brewing a little bit, and then started brewing his own beer. So he started off working 20% in the brewery, and then brewed with at that time he was brewing with a 300 litre brewery, but he quickly found that this wasn't big enough, and so he upgraded to a 1500 litre brewery in August of 2017, which took his brewing capacity up to 40,000 litres of beer per year. In 2018 he brewed around 10,000 litres of beer, and then he upgraded the brewery again in 2019 to further increase the capacity, and he apparently also has a history of letting different home brewers brew at the brewery. I think I mentioned that in one of the other videos that I did from these guys as well, and if you keep an eye on their Facebook and Instagram and stuff, you will see them collaborating with quite a few different people. But the brewery itself can be found in the old Alfors mill, and the name of this brewery is apparently an abbreviation of the Swedish name for this. So yeah, AKiA basically, yeah, so AKiA I would say. I think that is the right way to pronounce it. Correct me on that in the comment section below if I'm wrong, but yeah, AKiA Brygghus. But as of February 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 45 different kinds of beer, and like I said, I've been impressed with the beers that I've had from them so far. I couldn't tell you whether the ones that I reviewed, the rye IPA I know was the first one I reviewed. I'm not sure if that was their first release through Systembolaget, because I know there's quite a few breweries who haven't released through Systembolaget yet just because of the bureaucracy and things like that, and there are 700 breweries in the whole country here in Sweden, and I'm not sure, I couldn't tell you how many of them I have actually covered, maybe about 250, 300, I honestly have no idea. But yeah, these guys, as I say, relatively new in the beer scene, but I've been impressed with the beers that they're putting out there. So if you do come across some of these AKiA beers, I guess you're most likely to find them on the shelves in Kungsbacka and probably in some of the Gothenburg stores as well, but I definitely think this is a brewery worth checking out. I was impressed with the IPAs, so as I say, curious to see what one of their darker beers is going to be like. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about AKiA Brygghus for the moment. Hopefully I can get a few more beers from these guys in the future. Black IPA next month, and we'll see what they're releasing throughout 2021. But yeah, that's your history section. So yeah, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. I'll just like to have a little quick look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. It does look a wee bit different compared to the other ones that we've had before. It looks like a kind of wood grain or something like that, or a kind of contrast background. So yeah, not sure exactly what the intention behind the artwork here is, but there you can see the AKiA Brygghus symbol, and it is a water mill, of course. I don't think I mentioned that. This Alfors mill is a water, yeah, basically a water mill. But yeah, really nicely presented can. This one, 440 millilitres. I'm guessing I would have paid about 50 Swedish krona for this. It's 8%, so it is a little bit stronger. So, and you know, I think the tax in the Swedish beers is based on the malt rather than just the alcohol content. I could be wrong on that though. But yeah, this particular stout contains oats and rye and hops and yeast. So yeah, it should be quite interesting, this one. So it is straight up oats rather than oatmeal. So yeah, 8%, 8.5% ABV, as I say, about 50 Swedish crowns, so roughly about €5, I think. $5.50 American, about £4.30, £4.50, something like that, sterling for those of you watching in different areas. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Opaque Imperial Oat Stout, 8.5% ABV from AKiA Brygghus in Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg. My first dark beer from this brewery, which is quite exciting. So yeah, there we go. This should be very interesting. Maybe we can get all of it in, why not? I'm always in two minds about whether to do that. That's very, very full. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea, but you know, sometimes bad ideas turn out to be very good ideas later on. You just don't realise it at the time. But yeah, there we go. So as you can see, when this beer poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, quite dark tan head, but that's faded away to be nothing. Of course, one of the things that really helps beers retain their head is wheat, and this beer doesn't have wheat listed on the ingredients. So there you go. The head faded away very, very quickly, just within a few seconds. You can see that the colour of this beer is, if we put the light through this beer does have a good degree of haze to it. When you've got rye and you've got oats in this one, you know, that's a bit of a given that you're going to get a good bit of haze out of it. But yeah, that's it looks pretty nice. But yeah, a good little bit of haze in this one, and I would describe this beer as a kind of dark ebony rosewood colour. Around the surface, it's got a little bit of a sort of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max kind of chestnutty type vibe to it. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice, I have to say. I do like how this one goes together. So thumbs up on the appearance. But you know, when it's an Imperial Stout, there's nothing. this one, it really is not surprising in terms of what it gives you. So yeah, I think that's all we need to say about the appearance of this beer. The other thing that we should say about this one is that at 8.5% ABV, this is quite a low alcohol Imperial Stout by, you know, modern standards. I think probably the minimum you can maybe say, for some people might argue 7.5. Yeah, so maybe 7.5 or 8% I think is the minimum for an Imperial Stout. So yeah, this is quite a low alcohol Imperial Stout, but I think if you go much beyond this, you have to go into like double mashes and all of this kind of thing, and long boils and stuff like that. So yeah, should be quite interesting, as I say. But yeah, lovely looking beer, this one. As I always tell you in the videos, the colour of your beer depends, 1, on the type of malts that you use, and 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker beer out of it. But yeah, this one, be curious to know what the boil on this would be. curious to know. But yeah, as I say, it's dependent on in the first instance on what what malts you use. So yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. I'm a big ingredients nerd when it comes to these beers. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one then. Need to be careful with it that I don't stick my nose in it. Yeah, it's interesting actually. Needs to just sugar it up a wee bit. This is why putting all of it in was a bad idea. But yeah, it's interesting, this one. It actually, the aroma that it gives you is almost kind of silky, if that makes sense. So straight away with this beer, you can smell a little bit of the kind of rye sort of graininess in the background there. You can smell the smoothness and the thickness of the oats in this one, which is really interesting as well. So yeah, big. Yeah, nice kind of smooth. Sort of brown bready backbone there for sure. I would definitely say that about this beer. Lovely big kind of smooth oatiness. So I think the oats kind of dominate the aroma in this beer. When it's an Imperial oatmeal stout, that's kind of stating the obvious, to be honest. So yeah, but yeah, the beer does have a wee bit of a kind of, it does have a wee bit of a chocolatey vibe to it, but I don't think that's too much. It's maybe got a sort of 30-40% milk chocolate cocoa-y sort of thing to it. So yeah, I like how that I do like how that side of things goes together with this beer. It's a very, it comes across as a very smooth and very slick stout. I'm trying to figure out whether there's a bit of brown sugar in this. It does come across as having, a little bit of a slightly toasty caramel in this one. It's definitely not thick enough to be kind of treacle and molasses. It is more of a kind of toasty caramelly note that you get out of this one. So yeah, how do you say, it's got a really nice, I think this beer's really interesting for me. This isn't like a lot of the kind of modern craft beer stouts that you're going to come across. Actually, this one is really different. In some ways it does come across as an oatmeal stout, and that's interesting. I think the rye gives you the impression of it being more oatmeal-y, if that makes sense, rather than just being a straight kind of oat stout. But yeah, as I say, brown bread underneath. You can smell the smoothness of the oats in this one. There's a bit of a kind of 30% milky kind of chocolate. And you also have, like I say, you've also got a bit of a kind of toasted caramelly note to this one. So the malt base for me comes across as quite straight shooting. I mean, you might get a few woody aromas out of this one. You might get one or two kind of nutty things in there as well. So, yeah, I think this one has a really, I think this one's actually got a very, very nice aroma. The more that I smell of it, the more kind of brown bready, sort of rye bready it becomes, definitely. But yeah, this one gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. I think this is a very, I think it's a very solidly done beer. But that's akin to my other experiences of this brewery so far. But yeah, a little bit of wood, a little bit of kind of, a little bit of a kind of nutty undertone to the beer, but really nicely executed. Again, very, very good from AKiA Brygghus. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things, the hops I don't find have such a big presence in this beer, but you'd kind of expect that. So you definitely get a wee bit, you get a little bit of earthiness out of it. You get some nice kind of, you get a wee touch of herbal notes, some nice floral aromaticity, a little bit of a lighter sort of grassy kind of thing out of it as well. And then with the fruity side of the beer, you have on the fruity side of the beer, you have a really nice kind of light figgy sort of quality to it. So yeah, there's a sort of light figgy note in there. You can get a bit more of a kind of rich plummy note to it. Maybe a wee tiny touch of raisiny sharpness as well, but you also get some blackcurranty and slightly more juicy blackberry notes out of this beer. So the fruity notes are kind of what you'd expect, but the hops I think really take a bit of a back seat to this one. But yeah, the aroma of this one, I think first impression of it is smooth, slick, and it's got a nice little bit of depth in there as well, to be honest with you. The more that you smell of it, the more things you can get out of it. But yeah, I think this is going to be quite a nice one. I think it's going to be a nice kind of smooth stout, this beer. So yeah, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma, as I always say, but I have to say I'm very curious about this one. So yeah, let's taste it. This one is the Opaque, an 8.5% Imperial Oat Stout, they're calling it, from AKiA Brygghus in Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. that's really pretty nice actually. It is, you know, to be honest, from the aroma, it actually comes across as kind of how I was expecting, but it does have a wee bit more of a kind of black malty, toasty bite to it, which doesn't really come out in the aroma. But yeah, definitely a wee bit more dark character. So yeah, that's an interesting sort of side to this one. But otherwise, it is pretty much what you'd expect from the aroma. Absolutely. Yeah, you get a wee bit, you know, in fairness, for an 8.5%er, you actually do get a little bit of booziness out of this as well. And I mean, when it's an Imperial Stout, you do expect that. You do expect that. But yeah, I'm just going to say thumbs up to AKiA Brygghus once again. I think this is quite an inventive beer, and it's solid. You know, if I compare this to the other ones that I've had before, you know, I guess in a sense, it's this beer is quite different from a lot of the other ones that you'll find around Sweden. But it's solidly done. Whereas, you know, the New England IPAs, the IPAs that we've had from these guys before, they were like really quite striking beers. This one, I would say, it's more. I got this, you know, it's the sort of thing, I got this beer because I thought it sounded interesting. The other ones I got because I was like, right, oh, there's a West Coast IPA, you know, there's a New England double IPA. I want to see, I'd been impressed with the first beer I had from these guys, so I wanted to see what they could do in that style, and I thought, you know, they're standing up there. You know, in this IPA category, they're standing up there with some of the, you know, the really established and really respected breweries. In this case, I think they've got a solid beer, but it's difficult to think what to compare this one to because it is, you know, so unique in its style category. So yeah, I mean, the obvious stout brewery is Nerd Brewing, and I think it doesn't, you know, next to beers like that, this one to me doesn't, it doesn't look out of place next to things like that. Again, it's a solid beer, and as I say, this probably, I would think that over the period that this brewery's existed, I would think there probably would be a bigger kind of punchier stout that they've done. But I really like this one. I do really like this one. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is I don't think this is a beer that's going to absolutely blow you away, but you're going to appreciate how solid that is. I think you are. That's a fair statement to make about this one. It's not craziest, punchiest beer you're going to find from AKiA, but you are going to appreciate this beer. Absolutely. And I certainly like it. I love a good oatmeal stout. This one's definitely a bit kind of smoother and slicker in a sense, but it's well done. Absolutely. So yeah, where do we start with this one then? Straight away with this beer, middle third of your palate, you can feel that nice kind of rye quality there. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. It's got a nice kind of soft white bready note to it. And yeah, I really like that about this beer. So you can feel either side of that middle third of your palate on the border region between front third and middle third, and the border region between middle third and back third. The sort of the graininess of the sort of rye gets a little bit more kind of toasty in a sense to mark in the marking of those border regions, and then in the middle third of your palate, on top of that, you can feel the smoothness of the oats in here. You can really feel them just sitting on top of that part of the beer. So I really like that about this one. The fact, you know, I like that it's got the rye, gives the beer a little bit of depth, if that makes sense, and then the oats, they sit on top of that as the kind of the linchpin of the beer. So it gives you what you'd want, but you can taste there is, you know, it almost, the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, that rye develops a little bit of a kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crusty thing. I mean, maybe have they maybe used a little bit of like carafa or something in this beer as well, just to, you know, like just a little touch, just to give it a wee bit of a kind of well-fired kind of note, and that doesn't dominate the beer at all. You only get that a bit later on. You really get the kind of the sort of black malty, roasty, toasty things a bit later. But yeah, there's quite a few interesting things going on with this beer. But on top of that oaty layer, what you'll find is the chocolatey side of this beer starts to come out a little bit later on as well. And I would say that the chocolatey notes in this beer are kind of akin to like a sort of 50% cocoa chocolate. Like more in the middle of the palate, it comes across as a wee bit more milky chocolate, but I think as you move further out from that, it starts to, you know, give you a little bit more cocoa bitterness almost. And that, as I say, is just sitting on top of the oaty layer. But in the middle of that chocolate, you get a bit of brown sugar, and I would say it actually comes across as a more kind of sweet caramel note in the centre. And again, as you move further out from the middle of your palate, it becomes a little bit more kind of toasty in a sense too. So this beer's got a really interesting kind of layered thing going on in the middle third of your palate there, and I think this is one, it definitely develops a bit more the more that you drink of it. This beer, it shows you more, it gradually reveals itself, this one. I think that's fair to say about it for sure. But yeah, it's definitely one of these beers that's going to grow on you a little bit. Absolutely. And it's really well executed. Yeah. It's like a happy middle ground, this beer. You know, it reminds me a little bit of the Riptide, which was always one of my favourite kind of Scottish craft beer stouts. That was by Brewdog, of course. I always really enjoyed Riptide, because it's like this is almost like a milk stout in a lot of ways. It's almost a little bit like a kind of milk stout, a sweet stout, but it's just got a wee bit more kind of toastiness to it, if that makes sense. And I like the way that this one kind of straddles the line between, you know, a sort of 6% stout and you know, a sort of big 10 Imperial stout, if that makes sense. So that's another aspect to think about with this beer. I think it is probably intended to kind of straddle the line, because, you know, to drink a big 440 of an Imperial stout is a big ask, to be honest with you. I don't like, you know, I always share those beers with people, whereas this one, you could theoretically drink this one yourself. It's not really much different to drinking a double IPA or something like that, to be honest with you, with this one, because it's the 8.5%. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting beer, this one. As I say, it's hard to compare it to other things because it's quite unique. What you'll also notice about this beer is that if you go to the front corners of your palate and diagonally back, you will notice a few woody notes coming out of the beer. There's maybe a tiny little hint of nuttiness. If you go to the centre of your palate and move forward, you just get a tiny little hint of nuttiness out of this one as well. So yeah, the malty side of this beer, I think, is really interesting. On the malty side of things, then, as well, if we go into that back third of your palate, you do get a wee bit more of a kind of thicker bready note on the back third of your palate. You can feel it's a little bit more rye malt orientated on that back third of your palate, and it just sort of thickens up a wee bit. The graininess just feels a little bit thicker. But I would say that this beer, there's a bit more kind of thickness on the back third of your palate, then it drops away as you reach that kind of border region, as I said, with the more toasty, grainy notes, and then you've got that very kind of dense, smooth layer in the middle third of your palate. So that's definitely worth noting in this beer as well. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty side of things in this one. I think that covers it, but of course when it's a stout, that is the main body of the beer, if you like. So let's focus on the hoppy side of things, and let's have a little look at that. So yeah, hoppy side of things is quite nice, actually. So in the back corners of your palate, you've definitely got a little bit of we've got a wee touch of earthiness coming out of this one. As you move further forward, there is a wee bit of a herbal quality there, but it quite quickly becomes just a nice and smooth. It becomes just a nice sort of smooth floral aromatic note as you go forward. It's not too aromatic, if that makes sense. It just has a nice little bit of floral character. Then round the front curve of the palate, it's definitely a little bit sort of lighter and grassy. I would think, you know, I wonder, is it a bit of Bramling's Cross that's in this one? It could be Summit or Eureka or maybe even Williamette or something like that that's in here. I honestly couldn't tell you exactly what hop it is. Part of me wants to say that it is, you know, Bramling's Cross that's in this, because there is just a wee touch of an English herbal type quality to this one, and it doesn't quite strike me. The fruitiness strikes me as being a little bit smoother rather than being oily, which is what you'd get from the American hops. So that's an interesting point about this beer also. But yeah, as I always say, on that front, I think we've covered the green side of the beer as much as we need to, just soft grassiness on the front as well. But on that front third of your palate, as I always say, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So like I said, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a more kind of grainy bread crusty note, and underneath you can feel a little bit of the rye bready type qualities just kind of lingering there, and that forms the backbone of that front third of your tongue. So when you take the beer in, you'll get a bit of a kind of, you get a wee tiny raisiny sharpness out of it. You'll get a wee bit of a kind of, yeah, you'll get a little bit of a, say, what's the word I'm looking for? You will get a wee bit of an almost juicy plummy type note out of the beer. Absolutely. So yeah, there is a really nice little just kind of plummy element to this one, which I like. So yeah, so when you take that in, that plummy element kind of comes out at the back of the palate there, but as you gradually move forward on that front third of your tongue, it gets a wee bit more sort of almost figgy like. You can feel, I think the further you go into the aftertaste, the front third of your palate actually gets a bit more grainy as well, in honesty. But then as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, you get a bit of black currant kind of sitting underneath, then you get the blackberries just kind of sitting on top as well. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think it comes across as quite silky in some ways, but it's a little bit more, it's got a wee bit more of a kind of wetter oily note to it as well, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is a really interesting beer. As I say, it's quite unique. It's very difficult to find things to compare it to, but it gets a thumbs up from me, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. It's very rare that I do actually drink the same beer again, because there's so many new things coming out these days. But yeah, you know, I would certainly, you know, if they had a little brew pub and I was doing an out and about video or something, I would definitely want to kind of try this one on tap and see what it's like. Because in the can it's lovely, and usually on tap you just get an even smoother mouthfeel out of them. But this one I think is just lovely and big and silky. And on that note, let's round off the review with the mouthfeel. So what would we say about this one? So yeah, the mouthfeel of this beer, I would say, is, this is kind of top end to mid-bodied, bottom end to full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth in this. It does have a nice kind of, the oats, you can really feel, it's just got that oaty smoothness to it. If you think about oat milk, it's really quite similar to that, but you get a wee bit of graininess underneath it too, which is great. But the makeup of this beer is it's just spot on. It really is just spot on. This is one that's definitely kind of grown on me. Like I say, it's not a beer that's going to kind of strike you and blow the head off you, but it's one that you really grow to appreciate the more that you drink of it. Yeah, I think I'm pleased that I tried this one. I'm pleased that I chose this one. I think they had another beer that came out this month as well, but I'm pleased that I chose this one, and I did it because it's a style that I didn't have from them, and I like to try different styles from a brewery to kind of see what they're all about, and I'm absolutely glad that I picked this one. So I would describe this as a kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied stout, smooth carbonation, nice and sort of, it's got a wee bit of a kind of just that sort of creamy quality to it that you get from oat milk, for example. In terms of IBUs, I would think this is actually a very low, it's a very low bitterness stout, this one, although I'll say that and be wrong. This IBUs are my weakest part of beer reviewing. So, you know, maybe it's about a 25 or a 30 IBU beer. It's something that's probably even less than that, to be honest. Yeah, 20 IBUs, I wouldn't be surprised if it's that. But it's got a lovely smoothness to it. The green component, I think, doesn't play too much of a prominent role, to be quite honest with you. The further you go into the aftertaste, the more you get a bit of herbal quality and a bit of earthiness, and that's what makes me wonder if it's English hops that's in this one. So yeah, the hoppy side of the beer is just nice and smooth. The malty side of the beer is really nice and layered as well. So yeah, the middle third of your palate is a bit quite dense and really quite flavourful, and then the back third of your palate is a bit more grainy and kind of slightly fluffier almost. So yeah, the malty side of this beer is quite interesting, and the fruits go together really nicely as well. But yeah, I'm impressed with this beer. I think it straddles the line between a low ABV sweet stout and a high ABV Imperial stout quite well. So I think it's an interesting creation, this one from AKiA. As I've repeated, this isn't a beer that's going to blow the head off you. It's really one that you're going to kind of grow to appreciate. So this is one of the ones I'd recommend you try for something a bit different, and appreciate the quirkiness that this beer has. So yeah, kudos to AKiA for trying something a wee bit different with this beer. I think they've pulled it off pretty well, actually. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review then. This one was the Opaque, an 8.5% Imperial Oat Stout from AKiA Brygghus in Kungsbacka, just to the south of Gothenburg. Just a really, really nicely executed beer, this one. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from AKiA Brygghus. Like I say, we're doing a black IPA from these guys next month, if I can get it. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys very soon.